Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the panel International Universities Under National Pressure. The panel will be in English, as two of the participants will present their papers in English, and therefore we will not need a translation, but you will have the possibility to raise your questions, of course, in German at the end of the panel. I would like to introduce very briefly the panelists. It's Zsolt Enyedi from the Central European University. He's the vice rector of his university. We have from the European University St. Petersburg, we have Veljko Vujačić. He's the provost of this university. And we have the vice president of the Ludwig-Maximilians-Universität, Hans van Es, who is at the same time the president of the Humboldt Foundation, of the Max Weber Foundation, excuse me. But both are engaged in international affairs of our... Okay. We already dealt with the general question of our panel in one of the first panels today. Science has a global claim, but it exists under national conditions. That means it is financed by national institutions to a high degree, and it is sometimes under national pressure. In our General Assembly, in the General Assembly of the German Association of East European Studies, we dealt with this question already yesterday, and we expressed our solidarity, but I think the main task is to inform ourselves, and I'm very grateful that we have the possibility to be informed and to discuss with two of the main representatives of the two universities. I would ask you Veljko, first to present your paper.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. And I'm Veljko Vujačić. Yes, indeed, I am the provost of the European University at St. Petersburg, which in Russian is called the first vice rector. I think the main theme of this conference is, in many panels, but somehow no one is calling it that, and that is called trouble. We are all in trouble, and we don't know what to do about it. Globalization is in trouble, institutions are in trouble, and we in Russia are in trouble with the European University, and I happen to know something about trouble because I'm from Yugoslavia and Serbia, and then I went to the States, and now I'm in Russia, and trouble seems to follow me everywhere, and I seem to follow trouble. And now there's trouble in the States, in Russia. Serbia looks pretty good. It's the irony. But we are facing a crisis of liberalism, obviously, and liberal hegemony in a general sense. In the world, and that affects academic institutions, and particularly we're facing a crisis of the westernization project everywhere, which was so hegemonic in the 90s and 2000s, and both of our institutions, the CEU and EUSP, are part of that project of westernizing Eastern Europe, westernizing it in terms of the best academic practices, the best scientific practices, and I'll say a few words about how the European University went about that. Recently, just a few years ago, the atmosphere even in Russia was completely different. We had a Minister of Education who was broadly on our side, so to speak, within limits, but on the side of progress and science. Right now, the current Minister of Education openly spoke about ending the Americanization of Russian higher education and Russian universities. And of course, it's a big paradox because at the same time, the Russian government wants and has as its strategic goal that 5 Russian universities enter into the top 100 universities in a period of time. And of course, that's not going to happen, just like no socialist economy plan was ever fulfilled. This one won't be either, but it's a goal, and having goals is good. How that goal is compatible with ending Americanizacja, is very strange to think about. Now, the USP is a unique institution in Russia. It is private It has its own endowment. I'll show you a few slides about that. It's unique, and one of its mottos was that we teach differently. That is, we are not, you come to the European University and we have a graduate sitting in the audience, and you're not going to get your standard state university master's degree education and so on. You're going to get a Western style course, seminar structure, you know, with you know, familiar to you kinds of supervision and faculty governance and so on and so on. You know, and one of the other mottos of the university was, we're the most European of Russian universities and the most Russian of European universities, which sounds like a catchy slogan. But, you know, behind that catchy slogan, you know, is actually a reality that an American sociologist of globalization, George Ritzer, called glocalization. So there's globalization and there's local, and the twain shall meet in the European university. That is, we're going to remain Russian, but we're going to become worldly. And we're going to, you know, merge global institutional forms and practices with our own traditions and local culture, and we're going to create this creative merger. And that is going to be good for Russia, good for our Western partners to see, university partners and scientists, and good overall. You know, and of course, the fact that the European University was established in Petersburg is also telling, because that is, you know, Russia's famous window to the West. It was founded in 1994 as the first Russian non-governmental postgraduate school. In America, we would just say graduate school in social science. We have 5 departments: economics, anthropology, history of art, history, political science, and sociology are together thus far. And of course, the initial mission was to save Soviet-Russian science, okay, because of the brain drain fear in the 1990s. So they didn't start with a BA. They said, everyone does a BA. Let's save, you know, high-quality science, and let's restore it. And, you know, we model ourselves on Western universities initially, and to this day, stipends are given to the best students who are recruited into programs, and the university has its own endowment. This is our current rector, Nikolai Vaktin, who is an author of 6 dictionaries of what in the West we would call Eskimo language. He's a specialist of the far north. He's an ethnographer, and, you know, he is a wonderful person and a wonderful scholar. And just to say that not everything is bad, or to show that not everything is bad, recently he was given an award by the Russian business community, the main business award in St. Petersburg, for Best Manager of Social Projects. It was a way for the business people who are supporting us to say, you know, we don't side with the government in this particular case. The government is a less homogeneous force than one would assume, but that I'll say a bit later. And you see that we have also a lot of research centers who do various things. The most prominent one among them is the Central Institute for the Study of the Rule of Law, which actually is properly translated in Russian as the Institute for the Study of the Application and Administration of the Law, because rule of law is still a distant goal. Let's put it that way. But it's a very innovative structure, and recently, as you know, its findings are presented to the Russian government and Presidential Council for the sake of judicial reform, and it has had some real big impact. We have 2 international programs. We had them before we lost the license, and we had international students from many countries. There is a Western-style board of trustees with lots of prominent people. You see 2 of them here. Oh no, I missed the. Went too fast. On your right here is Mr. Alexei Kudrin, who was Minister of Finance, and still in relatively good graces of the Tsar. And to your left is Mikhail Petrovsky, who is head of the largest museum in the world, the Hermitage. They are our trustees. Petrovsky is the head of them, but we also have people, as you can see from this list, from Cambridge University, from Georgetown University, from Michigan. It's all very unusual for a Russian institution, and though some institutions have moved in that direction, their boards of trustees tends to be more formal, and ours is actually real. They actually do make decisions, and decisions that have consequences for us foot soldiers who stay to live with them when the officers leave, so to speak. And we also have a very distinguished international advisory board, and you know, as a provost, I have to do a bit of advertisement. But we do have a former dean of Harvard, a former head of the Carnegie Foundation, a provost from EUI Florence, you know, a former president of Stanford, and some very wealthy individuals to help and support us. So we also brought a lot of distinguished people to lecture at the USP, and that's also an area in which the USP has been a pioneer. It has been a pioneer in bringing high-level, high-profile speakers, not only, you know, politicians, but also, of course, social scientists and academics, first and foremost. And it's a kind of a hub in the city for that. Of course, some of these people are not in good graces anymore in Russia, like Mr. McFall, the former ambassador, but that's a separate question. This is the face of the right. This gentleman here is Mr. Milonov. He protested the fact that we are teaching gender studies in EUSP. He formally filed a complaint with the state authorities against us on the basis of his personal initiative as well as the initiative of other concerned citizens. The Russian bureaucracy sent us 11 supervisory agencies in 2016. Finance, taxes, fire inspection. I mean, I can't even name them. There were so many chinovniki, as they say in Russian, so many bureaucrats that it was hard to count them all. Unfortunately, as a provost, I didn't have to deal with that because I'm the Minister of Internal Affairs, while other people are Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Government Affairs. But the point is that they keep resending these agencies. Now, it's very unusual. It's very usual in Russia that they send inspections to you, but it's very unusual for them to send 11 or 12 or 13 agencies at the same time, more or less. We got in trouble. The one that has been our nemesis is called the Federal Service for Supervision in Education and Science, or I would call it the Russian Educational Inspectorate. Those are the people who come and check whether your documents are in line with the accredited state programs. Now, you know, just how strange that can look. I mean, I came from an American experience. Every syllabus that you ever made in the university has to be translated into a 32-page document. And if they find one comma out of place, they close you down. Okay? So they found some 70 or 80 mistakes in our documents, and on the basis of that, they started, you know, persecuting us, basically. We had, the story is too detailed here for your purposes and for our purposes, but we had a lot of courts. We tried to get our rights back. There were all kinds of complaints. You don't have a gym. It turned out that we don't need a gym because we have master's programs. We don't have undergraduate programs, and master's students don't have to do sports. They have to study science, and so on. Then we didn't have, you know, the proper fire things. Then we didn't have the proper, you know, disability facilities, which was actually not true because we moved to a new building where we do have all the disabilities, and so on. So the fight has been protracted and difficult for the university. And what is worse is they also, the city authorities, independently of Rosobornadzor, the educational inspector, kicked us out of this beautiful building where we had a beautiful plan of renovation. So where are we now? We don't have a license. We don't have students, we don't have a building, we have a lot of support letters. We have a lot of we had some demonstrations, and we can participate in worldwide university rankings because we don't have a BA program, but we participate in the QS rankings by discipline, and our Department of Sociology and Political Science was second to the Moscow Higher School of Economics, but second among all Russian universities in reputational rankings at 150th place, but not quite meeting the standards of the state, 100, but still 150 is moving up. Where are we now? I would just like to say, because CEU is going to follow, they put us in sometimes in the same pot as the Central European University, but it's a different picture in Russia. It is not the government versus the university, because the government in Russia is a many-headed monster. And so against us were the Rosoboronadzor structures and the educational inspector and the city authorities, and maybe someone third who is wrapped in a mystery, enveloped in an enigma, hidden in a secret, whatever Churchill said, we don't know. And on our side, supposedly, was the president himself who signed 3 letters of support for us, which went nowhere for mysterious reasons, and the vice presidential administration as well. So it's a bit of a mystery, actually, as to what is exactly going on. But it's not Orban versus Soros, okay? It's a little more complex in the Russian case. So what will happen? Let me address that in questions and answers. Thank you. Sorry,
thank you.
A little more time.
Thank you very much. The next presentation will be yours.
So I will stand, although I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm short, and I think that's a good enough excuse. So let me thank you very much for the invitation, and let me confess that I plan not only to inform you, but also to complain a bit. But after listening to the story of the European University in St. Petersburg, I must admit that we are in a very enviable situation. We have our buildings, we have our students, we have our license. So I think you should rather listen to my story in order to find out what is the difference between Russia and Hungary, what is the difference between being inside the EU and being outside of it, and whether the difference is big enough. So, following a little bit on the lines of Veljko, let me present very briefly the university itself. This is just like the European University, a university specialized in social sciences and humanities, although we have natural scientists working at the university, particularly mathematicians. It's also a graduate university. It is a relatively small university, English language university, and private university. It's an American university in the sense that it has been chartered in the United States, and its legal headquarters is in the United States, and we are accredited by American accreditation agencies. But in 2004, the Hungarian parliament passed a law, and according to this law, the university could develop its Hungarian arm, a Hungarian legal unit that has its headquarters in Budapest and has accreditation from Hungarian authorities. This double structure will become later on important later on in the story. Although it's a young university, it was established in 1991 by dissident intellectuals with the financial support of George Soros, a financial investor. In spite of its young age, it has achieved considerable success in academic matters. The same QS ranking that was referred to, that came out a few days ago, put the university among the first 100 best universities in the world in 5 different disciplines, and among the first 200 in 2 or 3 others. It's an extremely global university, so the globalization topic fits us. This is perhaps the most global higher education institution in the world. We have students from 120 countries, we have faculty from more than 50 countries, and we have application for, I think, more than 140 countries. So it's a very global institution, although originally it was designed to operate as an institution that caters to the needs of post-communist world. And even today, about half of our students come from the region, but the other half comes from different parts of the world. At the same time, it's very well rooted in the local environment. That is, we have very intense relations with Hungarian universities, very strong cooperation, because we are able to attract particularly much research money. CEU is one of the most successful universities in Europe in getting competitive grants for the European Research Council. Therefore, we also spend a lot of money in Hungary. We contribute about 30 million euros per year to the Hungarian budget. And I'm not listing all these things in order to brag, but simply to make the point that we had enough reasons until now to feel at home in Hungary, to feel like being welcome in the country, and to feel like contributing to the nation in various ways. This feeling has changed somewhat in 2017, early 2017. The Hungarian parliament passed a law according to which foreign universities need to meet a number of new criteria in order to operate in Hungary. I will not list all the new criteria, but just the most important ones. The foreign universities need to conduct educational activities in their home country. Now, CEU is one of the many American universities that are chartered and accredited in the United States, but did not have until now a campus in the United States. The law also requires foreign universities to have intergovernmental agreement behind them. So you can function as a foreign university in Hungary only if your home country's government had an agreement, international treaty with the government of Hungary. And there are several other criteria. Most of them apply only to CEU as opposed to other foreign universities. So this is why the law was dubbed very soon as Lex CEU. Since the law was passed, a number of new developments took place, none of them altering the fundamental situation completely. One of them was that the government in the fall decided to extend the deadline, so now CEU has to comply with the new criteria by January the 1st, 2019, and if we don't comply, then our license is withdrawn. So we will be in a similar situation to the European University in St. Petersburg. Also, the Hungarian government started negotiations with the governor of the state of New York. These negotiations have ended at the end of August, beginning of September, with a draft treaty that would allow us to continue to operate in Hungary in fairly similar structure as today. We were not part of the negotiations, so we could not influence directly the text, and we are not entirely happy with the treaty, but we find it acceptable. What we find somewhat perplexing is why the Hungarian government does not sign that treaty. So the treaty is on the table, the treaty was negotiated by the Hungarian government, their preferences are included, and yet since September, early September, the treaty is still on the table, the Hungarian government hasn't signed it. Also, in order to comply with the new law, we have started an educational program in the United States. The President of Hungary said, when he signed the law, that it's easy to comply with this new regulation because it's enough if we have a contract with an American higher education institution, we start a new program, and that will be accepted by the Hungarian government. So we did that, and yet the treaty is still not signed. Now, until now, I tried to present the story as if it was a story of administrative issues, but in fact, obviously, it was a political story from the very beginning. The anti-Soros campaign started sometime in 2015, and we at that time were to some extent worried, but also still self-confident, because we directly asked ministers in the Hungarian government whether this campaign will affect us. They told us that we should separate politics from the governance of higher education. They know we are a university, we shouldn't worry. Some of my colleagues worried. I believed the Hungarian government, so I was very self-confident and positive, until it turned out in the spring of 2017 that actually the government has been working already for half a year in complete secrecy, trying to design a law that targets CEU. Since then, the government has said a few times that it is accidental that CEU is particularly affected by this law, but at occasions Hungarian ministers have admitted that actually this is a targeted political campaign. The minister of the Prime Minister's office said that the government has lived in peace with CEU up to the moment when George Soros has published his opinion about migration. And because he proposed in 2015 that 1 million migrants should be accepted by the EU, Since then, there is a war between George Soros and the Hungarian government, and we have to live with the consequences of that. So CEU in this context is treated as a collateral damage of the war that the Hungarian government wages against an American-Hungarian billionaire. We have managed to mobilize a considerable amount of support from partly the political and partly the academic elite around the world, and we were particularly impressed by the support we received from Germany. So the German Chancellor, the German President, the German Chairman of the European People's Party, they all came forward and supported us. We received incredible support in Hungary. There were 80,000 people demonstrating against the law and supporting CEU. We received incredible amount of support from Hungarian universities, from professors, some of them taking considerable risk, signing the petitions. So in terms of support, I think we have been blessed with incredible solidarity from all around the world. The question whether it makes a difference, and at this point I'm not able to conclude in that regard. We thought that given the fact that it doesn't pay off electorally, particularly to harass a university, sooner or later the government will find some other target, and indeed the government did find other target, but unfortunately we were not left out from this basket. We, at least me, again, being naive or optimistic, I hope that after the election, the agenda of the government will change. Probably there will be other issues that will be in the focus of the governmental communication, and therefore we can hope for a reasonable compromise solution. But again, there are many who worry that once the election is over, the attention of the world will shift to other countries and other issues, and this is what the government is waiting for, and then we will face the same destiny as the European universities and the world. Again, I don't believe so. I think that there is this cooperation, this solidarity that manifested itself in so many various ways, but particularly within the academic world, makes a difference. No country, particularly in the European Union, wants to be isolated, at least in on these dimensions. And again, rationally, it doesn't make sense for a government to insist on closing the university that has contributed in so many ways to the national higher education. We are flexible, we are open for whatever reasonable demand comes to us from the government side. Unfortunately, in the last almost a year, nobody is talking to us from the government. So we are not in position to kind of monitor how the demands vis-à-vis CEU are changing, or whether there are any specific demands. About 3 days ago or 4 days ago, the spokesperson of the Hungarian government said that CEU is not up to the standards of the Hungarian government. He himself got his PhD at our university. And when the journalist asked, so what if we meet those standards, then he said, we will see what will happen then. That much about rule of law and legal certainty. Having said that, again, I think it matters how the world reacts. It matters particularly how universities around the world and academics around the world react. And in this room, there are many people who supported us in various ways, so let me just conclude by thanking them.
Thank you very much, Zsolt, and Hans van Ness is the next.
Yeah, I have a slightly difficult task now to comment on these two excellent presentations of two universities, which LMU is linked to. Welcome to the Provost of EUSP and the Vice Rector of CEU. We are linked to AUSP for years through the Venice International University, and since 2017 we are also linked to CEU because we are both members, and we became member of that network in 2016 of the Podium in Oxford, which decided to include the Central European University in reaction to the laws passed in 2017. So we actually believe in cooperation and in scholarly networks at this university. We do think that this offers some kind of protection against what happens here on some levels, especially on the political level. And I would actually like to leave the academic field a little bit in the few words that I'm going to make in order to put this into a broader picture as I personally see it. We do see that the world has indeed changed a lot since the Iron Curtain came down in 1989. And in many places in Central and in Eastern Europe, enthusiasm was followed by sobriety and then even by disillusionment. As a sinologist, I watched how easy it was for the leaders of the Chinese Communist Party to keep the Chinese people under control by explaining the failure of Harvard economics in Russia and some parts of Central Europe. And indeed, for those of us who did have the chance to speak to Russian academics at the beginning of this millennium, we know why that worked so well in China. They all believe the story that Russia went the wrong way in accepting too much American advice at the end of the 20th century. The discourse on the failure of Western economics in Eastern Europe and China was soon paired with a debate on the human rights issue that was displayed as an American reaction to Chinese economic growth. Western politicians who were forced to raise the human rights issue by journalists of their own countries whenever they came to China were conventionally ridiculed as puppets of the CIA who did not understand their own role, especially after the invasion of Iraq in 2003, when the Chinese began to proudly insist even more on their own white book on human rights that China had first published in 1991 as a response to Western criticism of its suppressing the Tiananmen demonstrations. In fact, in 2002, just 1 year before the war, the Chinese had for the first time published a white book on the human rights record of the United States. The last one of these came out as late as in April 2016. Human rights, the matter of human rights, has become a political weapon. In Europe, disillusionment in monetary matters during the 90s was when the financial situation slowly improved, followed by disillusionment over demographics, a topic that people rarely speak about, but which I think is tremendously important. In most Central and Eastern European countries, just as in Eastern Germany, in the West this had taken place a little bit earlier, birth rates rapidly dropped far below the reproduction rate after 1989, with about 1/4 of women without a migration background remaining childless to the day here in Germany, as a report by one of our institutes in Berlin recently said. An aging population found out that globalization apparently entailed a shrinking population. I see the rise of what is, in my opinion, quite inadequately and very imprecisely termed right-wing populism as a reaction to fears of marginalization that this phenomenon has entailed, fears that are not very often spoken about in our public media. Our solutions to gender issues do seem to be helpful as far as equality issues are concerned, but not really to solve these problems. And the migration crisis of 2015, of course, has strengthened that movement, which had been well underway for several years before that. Western European civilization that proudly thought to have won the Cold War in 1989, all of a sudden has begun to feel weak itself, and parts of its population seem to be most paradoxically fear demographic extinction of those values that we claim to fight for. Brexit, the US 2016 election, the rise of the Front National in France, and several other phenomena, among them some that we can observe here in Germany, are the immediate consequences of this explosive mixture of demographic and migratory crisis. They are not going to be wiped away easily by some academic explanations, and those who reject post-1989 answers to the trinity of the issues of gender, migration, both topics that came up in your presentations, and individual human rights today, have begun to win elections, or at least to gain a considerable share of the votes, not just in East and Central Europe, but all over the world. We have to face that. As I see it, the situation is difficult for universities that have been founded in Central and Eastern Europe, precisely because they were founded when enthusiasm for Western and European and American ideas were widespread. The enthusiasm now seems to have been replaced by a feeling of deep insecurity in these countries about how to behave in a world that has completely changed. At least that is how I, who is also the president of the Max Weber Foundation, interprets the situation prevailing in Russia, where have been quite often during the last 3 years. Feelings there are, in my opinion, oscillating between assertive nationalism and the acceptance of an attractive Western style of life. For historical reasons, of course, the situation is slightly different in Poland, that we haven't spoken about here, where there is also an institute founded by the German state, but feelings are also similar in many respects to those in Russia, just as they are in such places that I also have to deal with as Turkey, with yet another institute of the foundation, and also a country now very difficult to deal with, and of course in the country of my own expertise in China, we would like to found an institute in order to promote our values, but that is a very, very tricky thing in this world of today, because you can't do it as you would have done it 20 years ago. In all these places, situations may look quite different at a national level, but they are strikingly and remarkably similar when we compare the reaction of governments at an international level. They all counteract, some quite brutal indeed, against Western ideas that seem to come as an ideology accompanying globalization, which may have made some people richer as they were before, but which also has left many others behind. And what is striking in all these countries too is that, and this is also a new phenomenon, large parts of the populations are backing their governments. As a president of the Max Weber Foundation, I have to, and I'm willing to deal with the cracks that in recent years have sprung up in the formerly impeccable facade of global uniformity of a belief in societal progress. Western academics should, just as politicians, be watchful for their own mistakes in dealing with international partners and be listening to what our friends, but also difficult partners, may want to tell them. There may even be some truth in what all these people have to say. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to keep strong ties with our friends and partners in the great many of countries that, for the reasons that I just outlined, have over the last couple of years become more difficult to deal with for those who belong to what has been described the Western community of values, whatever that may mean. I do think it's very important that we develop a prudent strategy of how to deal with these countries in the future in order to protect our friends there and at the same time to get along well with the governments. And I wish your universities both very well for the future. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughtful comment. Now I will directly open the floor for the discussion. I promised that you can have questions at the end. So it's already 3 o'clock, but I think we should have somewhat 10 minutes for the discussion. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Could you introduce yourself?
Enyedi Group, Center of Independent Social Research. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm especially thankful for your concern and support of the European University of St. Petersburg. I'm an alumni. But I probably will be very skeptical to describe the future as positive. Because I'm observing the situation with the European Humanitarian University in Vilnius. As you probably know this story, when one of the independent, probably only independent university in Belarus was forced to move out of the city of the country, and now it's existed as a main program, complementary main program in Vilnius University. And now it's very, unfortunately, under the serious threat to be closed, because no support of this independent institution. So that's my question goes to those who are thinking about the future of the university in exile. Well, currently we are living in the world where the university could be removed forcibly. So that's the other situation in Ukraine. You probably know there's several universities from Donbass which was forcibly removed from and they are also living in the very serious circumstances in the main part of the Ukraine. So my question is, what the international community is supposed to do with such kind of in universities in trouble? Not in the situation when they are in trouble, but afterwards. Thank you very much.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Lars Podovos. I live here in the city of Munich. I've got a question to Mr. Enyedi. I've read that CU obtained an accreditation for 5 more years. What does this exactly mean?
Okay, then we could start with the first round of answers. Who wants to react to the first question?
Well, I will answer for alum. Thank you for the question. I don't think we're planning to move anywhere. I think, like the European University that moved from Belarus to Vilnius, I don't think we're going to be kicked out, or at least I hope so. I think there would be, a very big reputational problem for the authorities, or at least I hope so. I do think that we will apply for, I know we will apply for a license, and like the CU, we hope that the elections will bring some clarity in Russia, and that government bureaucrats will be a bit more relaxed, and maybe that we will actually restore our license. But if not, we will continue functioning as a scientific institute for a while. What can international institutions do? I think that the answer was partially contained in the speech of Professor Van Est, which is that they have to tread carefully in these situations. They have to talk both to the government and to the institutions. And there's no easy way. When people ask me what we can do for you, aside from letters of support, which are nice but largely have symbolic value, it's not bad, it's wonderful. What you can do is do something for our students, do something for our professors, give us some stipends, organize some conferences, send us some illustrious people at our expense, at your expense, to speak at the university. Send us a Nobel Prize winner so we impress the government. Send us a president of a university so we can put it in the news. There is public opinion in Russia. It is not, a democratic state, but it is a state in which public opinion matters. And if things deteriorate very, very badly, I think we're going to have a war in public opinion. Now, we might lose that war, and, but until then, there is some time. So, I wouldn't be so dark and so pessimistic about it. well, maybe I'm infected by 25 years in the United States, and my East European pessimistic genes have been partially transformed by the great American tradition of voluntary associationalism and hopeless optimism. But I don't think we're ready to lie down and surrender.
Would you take the second question?
Yes.
I would like to, just to make a very brief statement. What I think is important, I mean, I'm obviously in a completely different situation than the two gentlemen sitting at this table, because they have to deal every day with this problem, and I'm sitting here quite comfortably. As a president of the Max Weber Foundation, but also as vice president for international affairs, I believe in the importance of keeping good contacts, even with some places and universities that may not always be friendly or on friendly terms with us, because we want to establish scholarly networks. As I see it, academical discussions are a form of diplomacy that is actually better than any other diplomacy. You keep contacts with people, you talk to them on a very natural basis. You don't have to talk about what I try to do a little bit right now, namely political issues, but you talk about matters that are of mutual interest, and then you start to understand the situation, and this will develop. In my opinion, this is what we can, most of what we can actually do here in Germany.
As I mentioned, the CEU has both a Hungarian and an American arm. The American arm gets accreditation from the Middle States Commission on Higher Education. The Hungarian arm gets accreditation from the Hungarian Accreditation Board. What happened a few weeks ago was that the Hungarian accreditation was renewed, which is a great news. Unfortunately, it doesn't solve the fundamental problem. Only a minority of our programs are Hungarian accredited programs, so the majority of the university is not affected by this. Also, this is about accreditation and not about the license of operation. At the same time, what I think it's important here is to show that the Hungarian state treats us professionally on an everyday basis. So the accreditation process was very professional, very decent. We have been praised for our high quality control mechanism, for the fact that we fulfill this bridge role between the United States and Hungary in the report. So everything looks great if you only look at how we interact on an everyday basis with the bureaucracy. The problem is the lack of political support, and it doesn't matter how far we go in complying with the legal and academic standards. If there is no political support, we still need to worry. At the same time, the fact that we have a Hungarian arm gives us more protection than as if we had only an American one. Because even if the American one loses its license of operation, the Hungarian can still continue. The question is whether it makes sense to continue, because the two have been built upon each other, and the Hungarian, as I mentioned, is only a smaller part of the entire university.
Thank you very much. As Hans van Es already said, the situation of the European universities in Budapest and in Petersburg concern us, because these universities are our partners not only in Munich, but at many universities in Germany and in Europe. And for another reason, I think the university is a genuinely European institution, and in the sense of university history, Russia is a European country since the 18th century, since the founding of the first university in Moscow. So therefore, I'm very grateful that this panel could happen here, and thank you especially for the vice presidents, to the vice presidents of the European University in Budapest and in Petersburg, because it's not an easy task to present the situation to a foreign audience. Thank you.